Are you a woman standing at a crossroads, eager for change? It's time to connect with your authentic and empowered self at Boss Leap. Join Dr. Sylvia Morris and Dr. Angela Walker in this empowering community where real-life stories of courageous and talented women inspire and motivate. Engage in honest conversations that foster well-being, drawing from our own journeys. Let us guide you toward profound growth and transformation in both your personal and professional life. Here are your hosts, Dr. Sylvia Morris and Dr. Angela Walker.
Hello, and welcome back to Boss Leap Podcast. I am Dr. Angela Walker, and my co-host is Dr. Sylvia Morris. We are here for another fantastic discussion with one of our dear friends and colleague, Dr. Rhonda Mattox, a psychiatrist, media specialist, coach, and just all around fabulous femme fatale. She also is a leader in Toastmasters, which is a fabulous program for anyone that's interested in going into speaking. And I could say much more, but we'll leave that to her. And until then, we just wanted to talk a little bit about empowered voices. And Sylvia, I'll let you kind of take the lead. What does that topic mean to you?
I think about how, even with this podcast with Boss Leap, how we are using our voices to be authentic, to shine light on other women, and using their stories that we can all learn from. So, empowered voices for me is really just giving someone the microphone and having them tell their truth and not being in judgment, but listening with an open heart.
Wow,
What about
you
you?
just said it all. You you just said it all. I agree with you 100%. Empowered voices for me means telling your truth, being authentic, vulnerable. Because if we're not vulnerable with each other, it's difficult to tell the truth. For me, it's also important because I feel like I lived in a place for quite a while where I didn't always feel comfortable saying no, saying what I truly felt because I'm that kind of a peacemaker type person and I don't want to rock the boat. But I learned that my voice, giving it power, means that I say things that are hurtful to me. I can voice that doesn't make me feel good. Or I can say, I really am not comfortable doing that. And in that moment, I I have the power, but it also helps the person that I'm speaking with, whether it's in the work environment, whether it's with the patient, whether it's at home, with my spouse, whether it's with my kids. And I think lastly, I love our podcast because it sheds a light on a lot of voices that you don't necessarily hear. They're not necessarily, the first thing you see on social media or in the on the news. But they are women that have made just really incredible choices and share a lot of great life lessons. And it's important for my girls to see what other women are doing. And I think that's empowering. So, without further
Absolutely.
ado, our really powerful voice has someone that's really given us a lot of space to share, kind of empowerment to others, is our guest Rhonda Mattox, and we can't wait for you to hear all of the nuggets of wisdom and pieces of laughter that she's given us during this interview.
And she actually shared some really powerful stories about her own personal life and talks about the importance of therapy. So listen closely. And without further ado, we have Dr. Rhonda Mattox. Welcome back to Boss Leap. We are going to jump into our conversation with Dr. Rhonda Mattox. Dr. Rhonda, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
We're
We are
excited
so
that you are
excited.
here.
Yes, long time coming. You have been in our path, and we've been kind of joined in a couple of, I guess, aired videos along the way, but you have just been a true friend for us in this journey, our own journey here, and we're really grateful. And I know that you have so much to share with our audience, so we're just going to jump right in. And one of our first questions, our first pieces of information that we like to get because our audience is always interested is how did you grow up? Where did you grow up? What shaped you? What was little Rhonda like?
Ah, little Rhonda was very curious and annoyingly so. One of my favorite phrases was, but why? And I chuckle because growing up, I got on my mother's nerves so with why. And so to see me now as a person who is a researcher, a psychiatrist who asks why, a radio host, a producer, all of which I am applauded for asking why. I love it. I was an entrepreneur of sorts. One of my first jobs was to bake cakes and get paid $5. This is in the 70s. That was big.
That's good.
And one of my other jobs that you will get a chuckle out of, and this was an entrepreneur spirit. If the kid had a bad report card and they brought their report card to me and just let me see your mom's signature, I could copy that signature and I would do their homework. I'd finish my homework and do their homework. And so I was laughing when I was working for Dean, oh, I can't, Dean, Dean of the House, former Dean of the House, Congressman Dingell for the United States House of Representatives. And I was writing his speeches and writing speeches for Surgeon General, different ones or whatever. And I thought, I used to do their homework and now I'm getting paid to do the exact same thing, minus the spankings, minus the So, in a nutshell, I was curious. I liked reading. I liked doing book reports. I liked giving speeches, and all of that has served me well. I grew up in Stamps, Arkansas, home of Maya Angelou for some part of my childhood, and it was just, I was surrounded by love. My family I had 3 aunts and uncles that lived right behind me. I had grandparents that lived beside me, great grandparents that lived just down the way. I didn't realize that that was huge, and that most people weren't surrounded by their family until, much later in life, probably just in the last decade, actually. But I grew up surrounded by people who loved me.
Wow, what a gift.
Yes.
And so what did you kind of learn from being surrounded by family? I'm from a big city, and, when we went to visit our relatives, it was usually an hour or 2 drive or a plane ride. What did you glean from just being certainly surrounded by love, but also in close physical proximity, with your people?
I think one of the things that came as a result of that was that my self-esteem was really high because people loved me, and so they spoke life into me. I remember, yeah, everybody. I was a product of everybody, from the bootlegger to the guy at the store. When they knew that I made good grades, it was like, I'm gonna give you $1 for every A you make. And I remember this guy who owned a he owned a nightclub. And he had this deal with me that for every A I made, I got $1. And so I was making all I was making all A's all the time. But my mother also had a deal with me. For every B that I made was a whooping. So I had positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement at work. But I would just say I grew up in an age where, particularly if you were Black, that when you were successful, the community owned your success. They were so proud of you. And if we were watching television and someone Black came on TV, we were going to stop and we were going to watch that. If someone worked at the bank and that was considered a good job, we were so proud of the individual. So the community loved me and poured into me, not just my family, but my extended family and just the community who weren't related to me.
Did you also feel so it sounds like you were already, you were curious from the start, a true born entrepreneur from the start. So it sounds like expectations were already there, but not only it sounds like you got support, but would imagine you also had that feeling of expectations. Like my community expects me to succeed, and maybe I may be wrong.
Oh,
Um,
no. You're absolutely right.
Mhm.
And I will say that started at home. And that I don't think that was like all of my cousins did not have that experience, but I
Mhm.
was raised, my mother,
Mhm.
who was really my aunt, she loved school. She was raised during a time where she only got to go to school if it rained. And so she loved rainy weather because that meant she could go to school. So for
Because she
her,
was working, she had
because
other duties.
she was working in the cotton fields, and so
Mhm.
she only got to go to school if it rained, so education was so important to her,
Mhm.
and likewise, she transferred that love of education to me, so I remember, from the time I can remember anything, I remember her reading books to me, buying highlights, all that stuff, and so I grew up wanting to be a teacher, you know, and we lived just up the street from me was the school, and so I would see these kids getting on the bus and going, so I couldn't wait to ride the shiny yellow bus and go to school
Mhm.
and all of that. But the crazy thing was that when I went to school, I feel like what I learned was that my family was not good enough. Okay. So
Mm.
I am surrounded by all of this love. But when you go to school, now my mother was raising me as a single mom. So when I go to school, I am seeing mom and dad, so I'm like, oh, where is my dad? I am seeing just all of these images of the mom who stays at home and raises the kid. And then,
Mhm.
and so the images that I am bombarded with are images that suggest that my family is not good enough. And
Mhm.
that I learned from school,
Mhm.
mom and dad and a dog and a cat and a white picket fence. And I didn't have that. So the message that I received at school was not always what I had been taught, which was you're good enough, you're great, you're going to not only are you going to be someone, you are someone, but one day the world is going to know your name. So that's the message I got. And then when I got to school, I suffered silently because I didn't come home and say, hey, what's going on? These were messages that I was being bombarded with, but I wasn't necessarily giving my mom an opportunity to say, oh, no, that's not the way every family is, you know?
Mm. Mhm.
Yeah, it's fun. It's interesting that you say that. I had a similar experience because my mother was a divorcee. So this was in the 70s.
Mhm.
And it, when I would go to school, most of my peers, they had two-parent homes. Now, whether or not the
Mhm.
homes were happy or any of those things, obviously one doesn't know all of those things.
Mhm.
But it was interesting for me to have the experience of being taller, browner. My mother was worked. Not all of the mothers worked, or some of them did, but then they would
Mhm.
be able to pick up, my classmates from school or get hot
Mhm.
lunch, and all of those things they stayed with me. But I
Right.
also think it was helpful for me because I saw how hard my mom worked,
Mhm.
and I knew that I had to succeed and excel because my mom was really investing in me, all of these things, and I knew they just didn't kind of just come happenstance.
Right.
So really, thank you for sharing that with our audience.
Definitely. And along those lines, what advice would you give to your younger self, now knowing what you know, and certainly in your line of expertise?
I think for me, I would say appreciate your circle because I think at some point there was some embarrassment associated with not feeling like you're enough or your family is enough. And my family loved me deeply. They loved me hard. They sacrificed for me. And I think just realizing that now that I work in the detention center, I realize how well, I wouldn't say how uncommon it is, but I realize that you can't take for granted that your family is going to love you. And my
Mhm.
family loved me. I mean, my aunts, I'm from a big family. My mother had 22, there were 22 brothers and sisters that my
Wow.
grandparents had. And
Wow.
14 of them lived. And all of them, while my mother may not have had like a lot of money, I had no idea that we
Mhm.
were considered disadvantaged per se because I remember, I had black dolls. I had these nightgowns. My aunt who was in the military shipped stuff my way.
Mm.
My aunts who were, business owners, they just poured into me. So I didn't go without. I looked as fresh as everybody else did at school, but I would say appreciate and love on your family, especially when you have good ones. And even when your interpretation of them is not that they're good. I love my mom because she did not like when you're a single parent and maybe you've gone through trauma, you don't want to leave your child with anyone. So she took me everywhere. So I got to see the people that the world might they might discard. I saw bootleggers, I saw club owners, I saw these people who were certainly flawed, but were very much human and who loved me and poured into me. So I don't see things as black and white. I see that people, have good and bad, and sometimes they may in certain situations display more of the bad, but really a lot of times they're really teddy bears. And I think that helps me to be a really good psychiatrist because
Mhm.
even I think on last week, I saw a young lady who was 14 and who was confiding in me that she'd been a stripper. And so I said, "How did
Wow.
you get into that?" And, her mom had put her out, and so she was really stripping in exchange for, resources to have a place to
Wow.
stay, have
Mm.
food to eat. And I think, it had I not had some of the experiences that I've had and known some of the people that I've had, I think it would have been easy for me to think of her in a very negative way. But what I saw was a child who did not have love,
Mm.
who did not have support, and who
Mhm.
was doing what she could with what she had. And I think it made me a lot more compassionate because of the people that I've been around. Now, here's the thing. I don't know how in the world my mother raised me like she did because there's this part of me as a mother is like, oh no, I don't want my child to see this. Oh no. And I have to remind myself, there were some
Mhm.
things that you saw. And so you need to have conversations. And
About it.
I just remembering some of like me saying something mean about someone and my mother being really disappointed that I would say that because it reflected who her family was when they were growing up. And so just having these tough conversations and seeing things and then having conversations about who the people are really helped me to see people as multidimensional and not categorize them as good or bad, you know?
Uh, That's very
So
interesting, particularly as, a mom and, my girls are older now, but I have learned that just shielding them from some harsh realities is not really a great education for them. It's, uh, you know, having the conversation about the harsh reality, that they may have seen or, that we see, every day,
Yeah.
in the media and in even social media. So you can unfortunately, you can shield only so much because at some point in life, they're gonna be exposed to it. So why not have the conversations, about those things when they're with you?
Absolutely. I remember the young man that was beaten by the officers in Memphis. And I was very intentional because it was devastating for me to watch. And so I was
Mhm.
really trying to be intentional about not um, allowing my daughter to see those images. What I
Yeah.
didn't factor in was that she was going to school. And I thought, oh my gosh, she should have had that conversation with me, not them.
Mhm.
And so I do you walk this fine line because you definitely want to protect your kids, but letting them letting them experience life and then being there to support the journey and to discuss the journey and to walk through the journey is really important. I remember after a particular president was elected, my daughter kind of made this blanket statement of who she didn't like, and I reminded her who her godmother was, and I was like, and I reminded her of who my friends were, and she was like, "Oh," you know. So sometimes things will happen, and in pain they will make declarative statements, and then you have to go and and disentangle. I understand your hurt. I understand your pain. I understand your disappointment. But, they're going to know us by our love, and we can't let anybody's hatred contaminate who we are at our core. We can't become like them, you know?
Very good. Good info, as we knew you would give. So can
But
we
it's hard. That's easier said than done.
It is.
Like
Yeah, it comes
sometimes we
with
say
age
the
and
right
wisdom,
thing,
yeah.
but
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
then you got to walk the
Agreed.
talk,
So it sounds like you've had a lot of people pour into you along the way. And at some point, you made a decision that you wanted to become a doctor. Can you tell us what that was like and how that came about?
I'm trying to decide if I want to tell you all the ugly details. I grew up wanting to be a teacher, and I grew up being like the smart one. And so my identity was wrapped up in being the smart one who was number one in her class, da 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 da. And I remember going to college and like everybody was a smart one. And so I learned in the 8th grade whatever Adina Funderburg said, whatever it is that you would do for free is what you should consider doing, because whether you make money or not, you will do it so well that the money will come. Well, for me, from probably 7th or 8th grade, I was that one friend that people could talk to. And even if I was kind of judgmental, it didn't come out on my face, because I don't want to say I wasn't judgmental, but I will say I was very compassionate while you were telling me your story, and I didn't look at you like, "What are you doing?" And so people would talk to me, and when I found out that I could get paid to listen to people, I was just like, "That's a real job?" Yeah. So it was who I was, it was what I was doing already, and when I discovered, psychiatrist, psychologist, I said, "That's what I wanted to do." And then I thought, "Man, that's a long time to go to school." So I was like, "You know what? That's okay." Well, then my mom was just like, after I graduated, "When are you gonna start paying your car note?" And I was like, "Car note? Car insurance? No. I need to go back to school." And voila, a doctor was born.
There we go. There we go. It was the reality.
That
So
did
you,
not seem I wanted to say something like deep, but that was the part was you're gonna have to go to paying bills if you don't go back to school. Uh,
that's the truth of
I
it.
like the pragmatism.
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
What do you wish you knew before you went to medical school?
I wish that I had known about Kaplan courses, because a lot of people learned study skills. They met their prospective study partners and so I went to school and people already knew each other. So I wish that I had known to to do those question sets earlier. I thought, oh, I don't have time to do question sets. No, I didn't have time not to do question sets. So I wish school came very easy for me. So I was doing my work and other people's work, and I just didn't have to study hard. But I'd gone to a liberal arts college where our tests were essay. And so, in med school, the tests are not essay, they're multiple choice. So I wish that I taken those courses so that I could be a stronger test taker related to those multiple choice tests, because that was an eye opener for me to not just be able to sit and tell you everything that I know about it, but they wanted to know the best answer. So it was a challenge to finally to sit down and take multiple choice tests. It was a challenge to take 8-hour tests. I mean, like 8 hours, like 8 hours, guys. That's what you really want from us. So I wish I'd known about that.
And were you a
Yeah.
science major in undergrad?
In undergrad, I was a biology major, but I was
Okay.
taking classes like ecology, botany, and so it wasn't stuff that was, I probably would have also done something else and been pre-med. But my thought at the time was, I got to take these classes. Then I felt like you can't have a 3.4 if you're a something else major that's not a science major. So that was my thought was, if you're gonna have some Bs, I need to be in some science classes and not in something else.
I think a lot of us were taught that and led to believe that. And now, and some we're guided otherwise. But now we know. I mean, you can major in whatever you want to major in, as long as you get your prerequisites in. And some people are strong enough to do that. And then some may need to stick with just a science background. But I think ultimately, it's important for those young people that are listening, that it might be important for you to pursue something that you're never going to be able to do again. So we had an interview not too long ago with an art major, and that was a passion of hers. And so she included that. I loved art, and I still love art, but never would have thought that I would have been able to do that and get my requirements in to get to medical
Right.
school. So there are ways.
Yeah, I wish that I had majored in psychology and
Mm.
and got my prereqs. That would have been
That would have been great.
ideal for me. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So what advice along these lines, what advice do you have to young physicians, which we know that you're intimately involved with in the medical school and through uh,
Toastmasters.
Toastmasters, yeah, which we'll get into, but we know you're intimately involved and do so much for the young students coming up. What advice do you have to them or for
I
them?
think many times we think about finding our dream job, and I would dial it back a little bit further than that and say, let's talk about what your dream life looks like. Okay.
Mm,
Wow.
So, um, and that's different for different individuals. But if you are what your priorities are, you should factor that into how you choose your career, where you go. Some people will say to me, should I wear locks to my interview or should I take my hair down? Well, if you are couples matching and you have to go to a certain place, then maybe you are really concerned about that. But for me, I authenticity is just so important to me that I would rather not match than match to a place where if if I wore my hair a certain way, then I would not be well received. I can't do 4 years of intensive anxiety provoking, challenging to the core job in a place to where I can't bring my authentic self. That just would be like hell's fire for me. But depending on what it is that's most important to you, you know, keep that at the core and then build your life around it. If you know that at the core is you want to travel, then perhaps you don't want to be tied into, a surgical something or whatever. You want to choose wisely, or you don't want to do OB. So for me, I think it was
yeah, you
about
don't.
right. Oh yeah, you no, So for me, I remember I almost went into dermatology because my dad, bless his heart, when I told him I was gonna be a psychiatrist, he was just like, "I thought you were gonna be a real doctor." And that hurt my heart to the core that my dad was like, "I thought you were gonna be a real doctor," and so I shifted, and for, like, a year, I was doing, like, a a dermatology elective, dermatology research. I mean, and let me just tell you, cheers to the people who can do dermatology, but those clinic rooms smelled awful. I didn't wanna breathe the same air as those folks sometimes. I felt like I could catch what they had, and it was just miserable year for me, and so finally, I was just like, "If you want, somebody, you gotta go to med school, dad, but as for me and my house, psychiatry is where it is." And I don't regret psychiatry. It was the best decision for me. I've made such an impact. Some of my other colleagues desire to go into psychiatry. Their parents talked them out of it. And now,
Mhm.
honestly, they're miserable, And so medicine is not the thing that you go into to stroke your ego. It truly is a calling. It truly is mission driven. And you have to build your life around what brings you joy, what fuels you. The friend who is a pain doc, my God, I'd rather walk through hell in a gasoline suit than do pain. And she
Mhm.
thinks the same way about me as a psychiatrist,
Psychiatrist.
finds what I hear draining. But for me, it's invigorating and it's a gift to be able to be invited into people's hearts. So build your life around, build your career around a life that brings you joy and that
Mhm.
allows you to express yourself authentically.
Yeah, that it's so poignant. I will add that I snickered when you mentioned, if you want to travel, don't be an OB. And so I would say this, look at all your options. If you love I loved psychiatry. That was my first rotation, and I tell a really funny story. The first they had it set up where we did interviews. Was in a small class, there's probably 10 of us, and we did interviews with actual patients. So they had, whatever their problem was, and you had to sit there and have your session, and then we got graded, afterwards. And there was an alcoholic patient, and I was trying to convince them to go to AA, and they were just very introverted and timid. And I said, well, I'll. What if I just walked in there with you? And for me, that was a real thing. Like, I would imagine that it would be something. I mean, who knows with HIP and everything else now, but that's how I felt. And when we got to the grading portion, our professor was like, "You got great feedback, and you did really well. I got an A in the class." But the feedback from the students that were with me, they're like, "Really? That's what you would do? Nobody's going to do that." I'm like, I would, and so the end of the day, I liked psychiatry, but I loved surgery. I loved, using my hands. And then after that, my next rotation was OB, and delivered the first baby, and then it was all over. So nobody could have told me not to go into OB, but it would have been valuable had I spoken to women that were actually in the field of OB,
Mhm.
and trying to find out what some plan Bs and Cs are, because people transition, they pivot, such as
Mhm.
myself. And
Mhm.
so it's not always that high pace, breakneck speed. You don't
Mhm.
sleep. There are alternatives, and you can find them out there. They may be few and far between, but they can be found. So
Yeah.
I think I loved your advice of um, what does your dream life look like versus your dream
Yes.
job? Because then you can, I think, navigate a little bit more clearly. So thank you for that.
I think there is something about psychiatry and OB because I've had
Mhm.
a number of mentees who have been like, I don't know, should I do OB? Should I do psych? And I I'm baffled at what it is, but you still get to do the OB part with or the psych part with your OB patients because
Definitely.
there's a tremendous amount of psych that's involved. I mean, actually, psych is involved in probably every
Every aspect,
every aspect. Right.
adolescence, OB, menopause.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And you will get a kick out of the fact that I actually am a person who tends to say to people, I think you may be going through menopause or be perimenopausal. I'm the person that tells them that because we don't talk about menopause in our community. And so sometimes when people start having the foggy brain, the irritability, the sleepless nights, they don't associate that with, menopause, and I am sometimes a person who's saying, "I think you may be menopausal." You know?
Okay. We'll put a pin in that, because that's when we're bringing you back. We'll have that episode.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes,
So,
definitely.
how do you use media to improve mental health?
That I accidentally discovered. I, um, I was doing a research project with a psychiatrist who was working with OB docs on sharing how to treat how training OB docs on how to treat it. And they were doing their first launch was to train the OB docs and then to do a media campaign. And so I was slated to speak to a group of teenagers. And I sin greatly because, keeping teenagers' attention for any length of time is,
Mhm.
you know. So as I was driving, I was like praying, like, give me a dynamic opening. And as I was going there, I was reminded that my mom had attempted suicide while she was pregnant with me. And I was a third year psychiatry resident, and it had never occurred to me that my mom had attempted suicide. I'd heard it as a family joke. Your head was bald because your mom drank Mr. Clean. Never conceptualized that
Mhm.
as a suicide attempt. And so that is what I led with when I gave this talk. And you could see their eyes pop open and they were literally glued to me. I mean, like they were listening. And I told the psychiatrist that I was working with about it when I came back. And we were having that discussion because a student, a medical student, had died by suicide and had killed his wife. And so I was telling her about that, and she was like, "Would you agree to make a commercial?" And I was like, "No." Now, one thing about me growing up in the South is there were two things that I heard from my mom. Don't be in those streets acting crazy, represent well, don't tell family business. Don't be out there in those streets airing out dirty laundry. And so for me, that was my mother's dirty laundry. And I was an adamant no. And so she said, "Well, will you not say no? Will you consider it and perhaps talk to your family?" And even though I said yes, I wasn't really sure I was going to have a discussion. Well, when I did, my family signed off on it because this wasn't my, it was my, it was a, I was a part of the story, but it wasn't my story to tell. And so we made this commercial, and the commercial was, "I'm Rhonda Mattox. I'm a physician in psychiatry, a resident physician in psychiatry. I didn't choose psychiatry. I was born into it. When my mother was pregnant with me, she had such intense depression that she attempted suicide. We lived. Now I devote my life to helping others prevent the tragedy of suicide." 30 seconds. When I tell you that 30 seconds changed my trajectory, because I was on a research path at that time. That commercial aired all over the airways, and people started calling me to become my patient. And I was like, "I'm not seeing patients." And they wanted to be my patients. They would stop me at the elevator, stop me at the grocery store. I mean, like I was a celebrity for all the wrong reasons as far as I was concerned, right? And I remember when it aired, I had vulnerability hangover. Like, what are you doing? As a psychiatrist, we're taught to be a blank slate, not to share our lives with people. So I'm taught by my mom not to share my life. I'm taught by psychiatry not to share my life. And I've just gone on national TV and shared my life. And it aired during Super Bowl weekend. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So all of my colleagues, then I got a call from my real estate agent telling me I had saved her life. And I was just like, "I haven't talked to you in like a long time. What do you mean?" And so she was contemplating suicide. And she was like, "Lord, if this is not what I'm supposed to do, send me a sign." And in her bedroom came my voice, and she heard that commercial. And she literally had gun in hand and and she heard that as a sign from God. And I still get chill bumps every time I tell that story because I understand how close I was to not filming that, you know,
Yes.
um, based on my own stigma. So I'm a psychiatrist, but I have these stigmatizing beliefs about it that I had to unlearn and understand. The scripture talks about by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony, we overcome. And so while I've been given these messages, don't tell, don't tell, don't tell, when I told, it gave others permission to share that they were struggling. And so, I mean, I started seeing patients again, and I saw how much that one commercial impacted my community. And so fast forward, my mentor is like, "You have to go to Robert Wood Johnson." And I didn't want to go to Robert Wood Johnson Clinical Scholars Program. She's like, "You have to go."
That's first of all, that's a really big deal.
It is a really big
It's
deal.
huge honor
I
and
had
very
no idea
selective
that it
process.
was.
Yes.
And I wasn't interested, but I mean, like year after year, she's like, "You have to apply." And so when I read about it and heard how prestigious it was, I was like, "I'm going to apply so she will leave me alone. I won't do it." Oh my God. Family, I got 4 interviews. I got interviews at every site, every site.
Nice.
And so so my husband was like, "Well, it didn't matter because we're not going any place that's cold." So then so I declined all the interviews except for one, which was UCLA. And I'm like, "My God, that is suicide. You won't get in." Well, I didn't want to get in. I didn't want to go. Well, I got in and I didn't tell anybody. And UCLA sent stuff to my dean, to different ones. So I started getting these calls, congratulations. But I didn't want anybody to know because I wasn't planning to go. And then it was like, "You're what? You're not planning to go?"
Mhm.
Fast forward, I went and I had the opportunity to work with amazing individuals. You all may not know Neil Bauer, but he is the executive producer for Law and Order Special Victims Unit. Within a month of being there, I was having breakfast with him, courtesy of my director,
Mm.
and Neil was inviting me to work with him. And I wanted to say yes, but it was around HIV. And at the time, that was not like my scope of expertise. And I was like,
Mhm.
no. And, uh, and Neil is not Neil, people want to work with Neil. People don't say no to Neil.
No.
And so I saw my director, his face is turned, blushing red. And he's like, "No, what are you doing? Are you an idiot?" And so Neil was like, Why? Why?" And I said,
Mhm.
That's not my passion, and that's not I don't think I would be good for you. I could connect you with someone." He's like, "Well, what is it you're interested in doing?" And I said, "I'm interested in integrating, accurate, non-stigmatizing portrayals into Hollywood storylines." And he said,
Mm.
"So you're interested in doing it?" And he connected me to someone, and the rest is history.
So
I
you were authentic. I'm
Mhm.
jumping in
Yes.
here. And
authentic.
because you were authentic, you are living your dream life. I'm
My
teasing.
dream life, authenticity, it pays off. Now, there are some costs to it,
Mm.
but it does pay off. And so, I mean, I worked on episodes like 90210, ER. I have now I have non-disclosure agreements, but I have contracts with studios as we speak, in Hollywood that I promise you would be really impressed by. You really, really would.
I knew these shows were getting better for some reason.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And and so, I mean, I get paid to read scripts. I get paid to do all kinds of stuff that I'd never even imagined. And it all started with me stepping out of my comfort zone and sharing my story.
What advice would you give to someone that may be interested in, and particularly, we're speaking as physicians, but someone in their professional career that's interested in utilizing media to share their message or to help others in their field?
When I got into it, this was not accessible. Doing exactly what you're doing now, I would
Mhm.
say take these episodes, get them transcribed, get them edited, put them get some of this published, put it on LinkedIn, share. When you are doing what you're doing, you will become a magnet for those who want it. Okay.
Mhm.
And so you are doing it in a way that will get the attention. Do it about what you know or what you're passionate about, and push a little bit outside of your comfort zone. But if you're not a rocket scientist, don't talk about rocket science. Talk about what you know,
Yeah.
and get out there and stretch yourself. And so many times, understand physicians. Uh, all of us are experts at something.
Mhm.
Even if KFC, expert at chicken, okay? But we're experts at something. And whatever it is that you are frequently being asked about, if you're giving a speech and someone pay attention to the questions that they ask, because that is the next thing that you can write about. That's the next thing that you can do a show on. And people will stumble upon your content and then invite you to come. A young lady who is an attorney and stumbled upon some of my content on Facebook where someone wrote, "Rhonda Mattox is amazing. I went to something. You guys should pay to hear her. She's the bomb diggity."
Mhm.
That's kind of what they said. A
Mhm.
lady in Los Angeles that I've never met was like, "So you're talking to lawyers now. Hey, we want you to come and talk to us. And by the way, would you write an article? And would you come?" And so it's like that. And then when you go to these places, other people are there, and they want you. And the thing about it is when we don't learn business skills. And so when you're doing what you love to do, you're just happy that people want that information. Well, there's
Mhm.
only so much of you. And so you have to learn how to monetize this, so that you can be efficient with your time. Because in my early career, you could call me and I was gone. I would be there and I would be there for free. Well, now I value my Saturdays more. Now I need to go to some soccer games and some other stuff. And on the weekends, I want to be cold chilling with my family. So if you're going to call me and ask me to do something on a weekend, well, now it costs me more to do it. And if I have to take time away from the people I love the most, I want to be paid. So I would say do what you're doing, figure out a way to monetize your gift, particularly for the people that you don't know. For folks you know, maybe, but they have coins they can share as well. Now I'm getting into what so on the other side of me is I coach and I teach people how to monetize their gifts. What they are doing day in, day out, there is money for that, whether it be in courses, books, or whatever. And so I help people get over their money issues and have the conversations about this is a bookable event. I know you want to pick my brain, but we can talk about da 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 da. I don't want to talk about that over here. Book me, however, and that'll be in the right mindset and we can have those conversations.
Beautiful. And we will add that at the end. I'll have you give us your how people can connect with you via coaching. That would be great. So from you have had many iterations of Dr. Rhonda Mattox and have done the boss leap many times, jumped from many lily pads. How do you make your decisions? I think I know that one of the main answers to your question because I know you, but I'd love for you to share with our audience what's your formula for making those decisions?
So it's twofold. I am always working on jobs that I love most of the time. Now, not all the time, but most of the time. And so when I get there, I'm enjoying it. When it gets harder and harder for me to show up on time, when it's a struggle for me to get there, when the thought of going there is like, you know, and that doesn't happen a lot. So when my grace for the place leaves and I'm just struggling to go there, um, sometimes people, when you're doing things, you will see stuff that feels icky. Okay. And I can't tell you all of the icky, but you'll know it when you feel it. It feels icky. And you're just like, this is out of alignment for me. This does not align with my core values. I don't like what I'm seeing. And the thing about it is it may not be unethical, but it just feels icky to you.
Mhm.
Okay. And so when I find that the people around me are violating my core values, then and then the other part of that is sometimes, I'm a person of faith. And sometimes I don't wanna say, like, God tells me to go, but it's, like, in my spirit. I can't communicate to you effectively such that you don't think that I'm crazy when I say it, but in my spirit, I know. Almost like I'm talking to you, it's like, "Okay, it's time," you know? And I'll be praying about it because there are times when I wanna go because the place is uncomfortable, but in my spirit, it's like, "No, stay. You're needed for such a time as this." And I can't tell you how many times I wanted to jump ship because it was uncomfortable for me, but I had to stay. And then afterwards, it was like, "Okay, time up. You can go." I mean, I remember one time I wrote a letter of resignation 2 years in advance, and I thought when my husband gave me the okay to leave this high-paying, highfalutin job, that it was okay. And afterwards was like, I was drafting my letters on New Year's Eve. I was ready. I was mad. They had upset me and they were not treating the people that I work with right. Now they were treating me fine, but it was hard for me to watch them treat all the people around me horribly. And so as a matter of
Icky part.
principle, I wanted to separate. And in my spirit, the Lord's like, no. And I was like, what? I mean, I thought if my husband said it was okay to leave that high paying job, I didn't even think I needed to talk to God about it. And 2 years later, it was, "Okay, you can leave." And I was like, "What?" And it was after a therapist had some major insight and her life was transformed for the better. After she got to where she needed to be as a result of me, it was like, "Okay, your work here is done." I was like, "What?" And I wanted to say to that therapist, "Girl, you shoulda got your life together 2 years ago because I really been it got to go."
I've been done ready to go.
And, sometimes we're on assignment and we may think we're there for work, but we are truly there for something bigger than work. And it's purpose. So for me, it's purpose driven. I hope that answered your question.
100%.
Very
Yeah, and I can
well.
relate on so many levels. Yeah.
And I think authenticity is, I think, the word that's been running through our entire conversation. And being authentically in touch with who you are, that inner voice. For some people, it is God or spirit or however you want to label it. but that voice that says, yes, no, be still. And until I can kind of hear that voice, that's how I know when to move. So definitely thank you for sharing that with us. But I do, to lighten the mood a little bit, you did a wonderful show called I'm Not Crazy, But. So if I ask you the question, I'm not crazy, but how would you answer that?
Twofold. I'm not crazy, but I'm intuitive.
Mhm.
And I just know. Sometimes I know. I can't explain why I know, but I know. Okay. Or I'm not crazy, but I'm curious. So I'm definitely curious. And my mom used to say, curiosity killed the cat. And I but inquisitive and curious,
Mhm.
intuitive and curious. Yes.
So I want to go back a little bit. You talked about and one of the topics about what we don't say in our communities, what we don't talk about in our communities, and certainly mental health is one of those areas. I mean, obviously, we talk about it more now than I was, when I was in high school, but to make it okay to say that I see a therapist, to make it okay to accept that, yes, it's okay to go see a therapist, and even okay in someone that is deeply religious and they are, have faith. In addition to that, it's okay to seek therapy. Um, what advice do you have for us as a community? And I'll say as a community of women, I'll say as, the three of us here, a community in as Black women, because I think it's more certainly taboo in the Black community, Black and brown altogether. What advice do you have as a very accomplished psychiatrist? What do you want us to do?
Yeah. I think for me, I had to unlearn what I learned as a child. And what I learned as a child, I won't say that it was wrong. I needed some of the lessons I learned to survive. But as an adult, I couldn't thrive with though if I continued to navigate life with those lessons. And so I had to unlearn uh, the negative thoughts. I remember my mom thinking that depression was a luxury that rich people had, but poor people could not afford the luxury of being depressed. And while I understand where she was coming from, after her death nearly took me out. You know,
Mm,
it it my desire to be at the top of my game in medical school vanished. My concentration vanished, and I had done as much as I could. And I remember a dear heart, I think an assistant dean of medicine knew me, had recruited me into medical school, knew what I was capable of. And it was just like, I think you came back to school too soon. I think you're depressed. And so he said, I think you need to see someone. And I said, okay. But in my mind, I was thinking, no way. Okay. And so he picked up the phone and he called a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist answered the phone and said, I'll see her today. Do you understand what a miracle that is? Like,
That really
we're 3 months
is.
out
yes.
normally. And so, she said today, and I thought, okay, but I wasn't going. He picked up his keys and he drove me to that office.
Oh, wow.
Here's the thing. While I was acting like I was okay, I was actively imagining myself, or I wouldn't even say, I kept seeing visions of me in my life. I can't say, had I not gone there, that I would not have ended my life. And so for me, I had grown up being hard, being the strong Black woman, understanding that my mom said to me frequently, you may be the only Black person some people see. And so I grew up from 8 years old on knowing that the weight of other people's interpretation of Black people rested and ruled and abided in how I presented myself.
Mhm.
Do you hear what I just said? And
Yes.
so going in, and I remember I have no idea what we were talking about, but it must have been something tragic. And I had the smile plastered on my face. And I remember the psychiatrist saying, why are you smiling? And I was smiling because my mom had always told me to fix my face, to not let them see you hurt, whatever. And so I looked angry or I smiled, but I did not look sad. And so getting in touch with who with my feelings and being able to be transparent and show vulnerability and show emotion was something I had to be trained to do. Do you know how crazy that sounds? I need to be trained to show that I'm upset or that I'm disappointed. I didn't have I wasn't connected. I disconnected from that because it wasn't safe to show vulnerability in the community that I'd grown up. Now, I told you all that my family was making fun of my mother for attempted suicide. Now, you know I can't come out to them about being sad, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or anyone else for that matter. And so for me, therapy was the best investment I ever made in myself, ever, ever. Now, you know I'm a person of faith. Um, I I'm going to say this, and I feel a little uncomfortable saying what I'm about to say. Give me grace. In church, I learned to lie. How are you doing? Too blessed to be stressed.
Mhm.
Maybe I was
Yep.
stressed.
Mhm.
I learned, how are you doing? It is well. And I'm not saying tell your business to everyone, but what I'm saying is I learned to say the right thing, whether I was feeling the right thing or not. And so I got encouragement in church. I learned about forgiveness in church. But what I did not learn was authenticity. What I did not learn was honesty. Even though that's a part of the 10 Commandments, I didn't learn that there. I learned authenticity and being vulnerable and being transparent in therapy. I learned to process hard stuff. I learned to walk down memory lane and be okay that my mother was not perfect, though I loved her immensely, that my father was not perfect, though I loved them immensely, that I am not perfect when I had learned to be a perfectionist because the world was judging my whole community as a result of what I've done. And so I had to lay the burden down of being the representative and
Mm.
just be accountable for Rhonda. Um, and that took a lot. And I want you to understand this joy that I have, I still see a psychiatrist to this day. That is still a part of my joy team, my emotional wellness team. I have a coach. I have a pastor. I have good, healthy Black women who are strong and vulnerable and resilient and who let me be me. And so what I would say to you is if you are surrounded by people who are going to judge you harshly for saying, I don't have it all together, then you're probably around the wrong people. And you're never going to see how amazing you truly are and be allowed to be vulnerable. And it sounds crazy for me to say be allowed to be vulnerable, but many times, depending on how we've grown up, we really do need to see other people being their authentic selves to get permission and do it. And we do, unfortunately, sometimes need that permission. And so I am, I remember my brother told my pastor when I got on medicine, Rhonda's on that stuff. You would have thought that I was on cocaine, crack,
Yeah, I'm like, "What
uh,
stuff?"
fentanyl, or something. I was on a medicine, and so I mean, and it was really uncomfortable. And when I gave talks in the 90s, I think it was in the 90s, about, mental health, I was sweating bullets because the people in the congregations were not receiving it. And so it's interesting now to see, former First Lady Michelle Obama,
Mhm.
talking about, being a teeny weeny bit depressed, and to see the former Duchess,
Mhm.
Megan, talking about having suicidal ideations while she was pregnant, because we weren't talking about that stuff then. And if you were, you were being poked fun at. And so it's a new world. But what I'm going to tell you is your world opens up when you are courageous enough to invest in you. Don't let any friend, any partner, any pastor keep you from investing in you. Now, I would say, pray that you find a godly or a wise counselor aligned with you not one that's going to make fun of you or um, disparage your belief system or anything like that. But therapy is where it's at. It's where it's still is.
Is. So Dr.
Thank you.
Rhonda,
So I feel like we should just drop the mics right
It's
now.
not.
And then
absolutely, that's
that's
it.
it. That's it. Thank you so much for your transparency. Just nuggets of wisdom. I appreciate that.
My pleasure.
And we always ask our guests about their self-care practice. And you just mentioned a joy team, and we may have to trademark that with you. So on your joy team, I heard certainly there is a therapist, there's a pastor, you have a group of sister friends. If you were going to build the ideal joy team, who would be on your joy team?
So when we were during the pandemic, I called it my emancipation circle. And they weren't
Okay.
they didn't start out as my friends. They were like my colleagues at work, two psychologists and one public health advocate. And when I tell you we processed the death of Ruth, the Supreme Court justice, we processed the George Floyd, we processed Ahmaud, we processed all those deaths with tears. It started out, it was supposed to be Sweet Tea and Lemonade podcast. Most of those episodes didn't air because they were in academics and kind of needed to have a certain professionalism. So we'd be snotty nosed, teary eyed, but it was so refreshing. Listen, we have treated tears like they're terrorists, but they are therapeutic. And so on my team would be people that I'm safe with, that I can have these conversations, and then there's not this. And so I pay attention to my body when I'm with you. If when I leave you, I feel joy, I feel invigorated, I feel encouraged, check, I can hang out with you some more. If I feel more anxious, more fearful, if I feel judged, minus, deduct, don't want to hang out with you. And so on my team would be
That goes for
people.
dating too. Sorry, I had to.
Oh, for
Yeah.
sure.
That's
Those of us
great.
who are
For
dating.
sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And so on my team are people that when I leave them, I feel invigorated. I feel life. I feel like, oh my gosh, you can do more. And we are not competing, we're collaborating, we're encouraging, we're inspiring. On my team, I have authors and listen, I am writing, I'm a journal, I do journals and I'm writing I'm creating a journal. And I say creating a journal. I've always had these journals. I share them with patients, but my patients are sick of printing off the journal pages. And so by popular demand, I've put together this journal that's being formatted as we speak called Pathway to Peace. And Take 5 Pathway to Peace. And it's a guided journal through anxiety. Now, don't read that journal
Yes.
down. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I journal. I wish I could tell you I exercise. I think about exercising. Does that count as self-care? No. Okay. I go to church. I belly laugh. Oh, and I haven't seen you recently. I've lately, I'm a belly laugher. I love to tell stories. I'm a storyteller. I have performed comedy in a comedy club, and I have another set coming up.
That's awesome. Another. Oh, wow. I knew you did the first.
Wonderful.
Yay.
So comedy is
Where?
it's in Arkansas. It's at the Nut House. That's
a great name. That's kind of a double entendre for you.
It's at the Nut House.
Love it.
And so that is coming up, and that is so much fun. So much fun.
That's self-care, right? It's doing
self-care.
something creative that brings you joy.
I can't leave out my dog. Oliver Twist is a part. He is like at the top of my my joy team. Oliver Twist. It's a dog we got during the pandemic for my daughter.
They always become ours.
And she wrote a contract telling me everything she was going to do. She's violated that contract 1,000 times over. And that is my dog.
They're not binding with kids.
They are not binding. She hasn't reached the age of consent. And so that is my dog, my love, my joy. And that's the top. That's the top of the. Oh, and then of course I self-soothe with food.
Okay. We'll work on 2 of those that you mentioned.
We need to work on that.
But that's a lovely list. So great. Well, clearly, Rhonda, we have a lot more that we could discuss with you, and we definitely want to have you back. You're always such a joy just to be around from the moment that we met you, and you were gracious enough to talk with us when we kind of first started off in the physician media world. And here it is. We're uh, lucky enough to have you join us and take out time to join us on this podcast. I know our listeners will be busting a gut as well as writing a lot of notes. But before we let you go, definitely want, and we'll definitely put in our show notes. I know you mentioned your coaching. How can we get in touch with you? And then anything else you want to add? We definitely want to put the date down for your Nut House performance.
So first of all, let me just tell you, these ladies have probably not told you that they rock and that they are amazing and they're doing great things. And so I just want to just like do this right here for them because they are totally nailing it in terms of delivering to particularly to women of color, just a call to excellence, a call to live their dream lives. And the book, The Game Changer, if you don't have it, you have to go get it. It is definitely a game changer for you. Now, for me to reach me, you can find me on drrhondamattox.com. You can find me at drrhondamattox.net. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. If you find me on Instagram, you're going to see my dog, Oliver Twist, and you'll see that joy that I bring. I am not when you follow me, I'll just be sharing my nuggets. I don't come over there thinking I'm going to all sound all doctory. I may or may not. It depends on what day it is. But if you want to work with me to monetize your gift and your message or your method so that you can start getting paid for it. My husband went to Georgia and we drove 12 hours for him to speak. And they gave us a hot dog and a sandwich. On the hot dog, there was no relish, no cheese, no chili.
No
On the
chili.
sandwich, on the hamburger, there was not there was mustard. There wasn't even ketchup or mayo or onions. And that is what he was paid for 24 hours of drive time. And I said, yeah, never again. I have to get over my money issues. And so I help people get over money issues so that they can charge for the gift that God has given them. They can monetize it and get past those money issues. That's really what I do. Get past the money issues because you're already doing all the work. You're speaking, you're doing all of this stuff, but to help you package it in a way and market yourself is what I do, and that's the fun part. I love it. I love when people can either dial back the work that they're doing because they're getting passively paid while they're asleep. They're making money in their sleep, and so now they don't have to have a third job or a second job. They can dial it back. That's the fun part. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah, no, well, I can vouch. I mean, we haven't been on your role book per se, but just since we've known you, just your non-monetized
I
advice.
helped them monetize. I hope they listened to what I told them to do. And it sounds like they have.
We're working
Oh,
on it.
yeah, we just haven't paid you for anything, so that may be forthcoming. So at any rate, in interest of your time, because I know it's precious, we are just so grateful for you and love you and wish you all the best. And to you and to our listeners, may you be well.
So, Dr. Angela, that was a powerful conversation we had with Dr. Rhonda Mattox. She is a powerful woman. I'm feeling empowered now. We learned about being authentic, but what are some pearls that you took home from our conversation today with Dr. Rhonda Mattox?
I had to write this one down, so I hate to look down at my notes, but um, tears are not terrorists, but therapy. Lord knows I'm a crier, and for the
Me
longest
too.
time in my life, I, especially with people that are close to me, I always felt subconscious about doing that. And I do have to rein it in because sometimes it can be, a point of weakness if you can't talk through your tears. But knowing that to cry is okay, I think is a part of growth for me anyway. And so I loved her quote on that. One of the things that she talked about is doing things well, how she learned to do things well. And I don't know why that stuck with me in terms of, whatever you do, it doesn't have to be on a grand scale, but do it well. Put your whole heart into it, put all of your work into it. So, we started this podcast and, we could have done it the way, when we first started just recording, but knew that wouldn't have been what we wanted as our final product. So it's definitely still a work in progress. But for me, in terms of what I put out into the world and when I talk to patients, I want to do it well. And so if I'm talking about menopause, then I want to make sure that I've got all the updated information. And it may not just be the information that I learned in, medical school, but things continue to evolve. So doing it well was important. And the
And
power, the last thing.
I'm gonna jump in for a moment because I
Yeah.
don't want to lose this thread about doing things well. And I
Yes.
think it's doing it well consistently. So we
Mhm.
can do things well only when the spotlight is on us, or only
Yeah.
when our boss is going to see, or only when someone we love is going to show up. We have to do things well all the time because it is a habit. And
Yeah.
habits only occur when you practice them consistently and then they become second nature. So, doing how you do anything is how you do everything.
Do
So,
everything.
it is really important the commitments that you make to yourself. I'm going to get up at this time every day. I'm going to make my bed. I'm going to walk. I'm going to eat nutritious foods. All of that is a part of that habit of doing things well. So I didn't mean
Okay, so you
to.
just interrupted me to preach to me because
Yeah,
I basically
completely.
I needed to hear I needed to hear all of those things, especially the waking up thing. So, thank you. There's always a reason. So, I appreciate
Yes.
him putting in those words in your mouth. So, I agree with you 100%. So, it's not just when the cameras are on or the someone's watching, it's what you do behind the scenes is doing it well. And the last thing, I love about her, which is something I feel like I have in common is curiosity, 'cause I always wanna learn. And I feel like as we grow older, some people and maybe it's just the way we're taught or, say, okay, now is the time in life where you just enjoy what you've learned, what you've worked for and just sit back and relax. But I'm always want to learn. And so curiosity is something that drives me. The reason again why we do the podcast, the reason why I've done some other things outside of just, OBGYN in the office. So I love that aspect of life of just continuing to be curious.
Keep
So I think
learning
I've
it.
said enough.
Keep
How about
learning.
yeah, keep learning, yes. So how about you?
So my two things she said that really grabbed me. What does your dream life look
Mhm.
like?
Dream
What
life.
does your dream life look like?
Yeah.
I wish someone had asked me that question
Mm.
because when I was in the process of becoming a doctor, I was laser focused on that. But I don't think I had kind of an inkling of what my dream life looked like.
Yeah.
And now I'm at the stage of my life where I get to create more, I have more flexibility, I get to make more choices. So I am in the space now, and I'm grateful for that, of being able to say, well, I envision or my intention is for my life. But I think the earlier you start thinking about what your dream life will look like, will really pay dividends, and your dream can change. So I don't want you to think that, oh, my dream is fixed. Just like Dr. Angela was just saying, we are always learning. So we are tweaking the dream. And then
And I'm gonna interrupt you.
oh, yes, please.
So on that dream life, because I think the caveat there was she was saying to ask what your dream life, not your dream job. And as
Mhm.
mentors, sometimes I do tend to ask or to young people ask what their dream job is, but it really is the life around the job. And maybe something that that you want to do. And it's valuable to speak to some people that are doing the thing that you may want to do and ask what their life is like, what they would like it to look like, and how you would get to that point when you're kind of trying to put the whole package together. So I agree. I love that. So what was your number 2?
And then number 2, I called it her joy team. I think she referred to it as her emancipation group or circle, I
Yes.
think is how she coined it. But I like the idea of a joy team. And, I have a therapist. I have a physical therapist because I have some neck issues. I have a personal trainer. I do a fair amount of Pilates, which I enjoy. I have a hairstylist. I have an esthetician. My joy team gets really long, but then also, as equally as important, I have my girlfriends, including Angela and the rest of the girls and my co-authors from the game plan. I think having a joy team is really, really important, and being intentional about who is on that joy team. And if they're making you feel good when you leave their presence and your body says, oh, okay, your heart rate's lower, your breathing is more calm, you're not feeling all anxious inside, then that
Part.
person could be considered for your joy team.
That
So,
part.
yeah.
That was right. I mean, that spoke directly to me. I'm surprised that didn't end up on my list, but absolutely, that was beautiful. So, well, excellent. Well, we are both full, I know, as we always are when we leave her presence. And we are just grateful that you guys are along the ride with us and are able to experience what we are experiencing. And certainly, if you have any ideas of what you'd like to see and hear, let us know. But until we meet again, may you be well.
And you can reach us at bossleeppodcast@gmail.com. Also on our website, bossleeppodcast.com. Please share, like, subscribe. Thank you very much. May you be well.
That's a wrap on another episode of Boss Leap. May this conversation enlighten your path toward personal growth and professional empowerment. For more thought-provoking and eye-opening discussions like this one, head to our website at bossleeppodcast.com. Always remember to celebrate your wins and trust yourself. A positive mindset can push you out of your comfort zone and into far greater heights. Until next time, may you be well.
Before we go, there's one more thing the lawyers have asked us to include. It's the legal language. And you know how doctors love lawyers. This podcast is presented only for educational and entertainment purposes. Although we are doctors, on this show, we are just your friends. This podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of your physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professionals. Understood? Awesome. We'll see you in the next episode.